Welcome to Paradigms at paradigms.life, the radio show and podcast that brings you inspiring people with visions of a viable future for life on Earth that includes humans. Hi, I'm Baruch, host of Paradigms. Thanks for tuning in. We've got a great guest for you. He's a drummer and a composer and a band leader. He's going to talk to us about music. He's also a New Orleans native, and he's going to tell us how they're doing in New Orleans, almost 18 years after Katrina. Cool guy, great music. Let's meet him now on this episode of Paradigms. Wayne Maureau, welcome to Paradigms.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to talk with you.
All right.
I've been listening to your new record, At the Water's Edge, and I'd love to talk with you about that and about how New Orleans is doing. But I'd like to start out just by getting a little bit of your personal story. How did you end up playing music, becoming a drummer, and how your career has progressed so that you are a band leader and a composer and all this?
Originally from New Orleans, I'm a native, and grew up hearing all the great New Orleans music and going to Mardi Gras parades and all of that kind of thing. So, the story my mother always tells about how I started on drums is we were at a Mardi Gras parade, and I picked up two sticks and was sitting on the curb, playing on the street when the marching bands would come by. And a friend of the family who was a trumpet player said, "Oh, you should get him some drum lessons." And so she did. And so that kind of started it, but I've always really loved rhythm and groove and different types of music, which is one of the really cool things about New Orleans is there's a lot of variety of music here, much more so than other places in America. We have the whole Caribbean influence. We have all the Mardi Gras Indian music. We have the old New Orleans R&B and funk music. We have the Meters. We have Walter Wolfman Washington. But then we also have this Caribbean, Latin, Brazilian influence. So, that's one of the things that's been great about being a musician, especially a drummer in New Orleans, is one night I might be playing a funk and R&B gig, and the next night I'm playing Brazilian and Latin music, and the next night I'm playing straight ahead swing jazz. And so it's really been very, very interesting to be able to do all those kinds of things because I'm interested in all those things.
It must be amazing for your brain and your body to switch back and forth between all these. I mean, music is music, but, to go to those different places in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it's challenging, but it's always fun. And it keeps a lot of variety, I think if I had to, just play one genre my whole life, I might have gotten burned out, but with all these different things always happening, it really keeps it fresh and interesting.
I'm talking with Wayne Maureau. He's got a new record called At the Water's Edge, and we're going to hear some of it right now, and then we'll be back with more conversation. Here's a piece called South Lake, Wayne Maureau, At the Water's Edge, on Paradigms, at paradigms.life. South Lake from Wayne Maureau's new record, At the Water's Edge. Isn't that great music? All right, here's the next part of my conversation with Wayne Maureau. So this record, At the Water's Edge, it's basically two different trios.
Correct.
And as soon as I saw that, it changed the way I was listening to it.
Oh, well, okay.
Which was just interesting. But, you've got one trio with Joe Ashlar on the piano, Ed Wise on bass, and you on drums. And then you've got a second trio with Jordan Baker on piano, Brian Kazurki on bass, and you on drums. And they're just great. And it's not like separated one trio. The songs are interspersed. I'm just curious about the whole organization and recording and that whole business.
Well, I mean, there's a few reasons I did it that way. First of all is, as I was writing the songs, it kind of became apparent to me that, certain ones I definitely wanted acoustic bass. Others I wanted a little funkier edge of the electric bass. But also, even more than that, it's the style and the approach of the players. Like, for example, Ed Wise is a great acoustic bass player, but he's really rooted more in the straight ahead jazz swing tradition. Although he can do the other stuff, like the Brazilian stuff and the Caribbean stuff and all, he's got more roots in the straight ahead jazz world. And he has such a beautiful tone, and he's such a creative guy. And so I knew I wanted to have him on, the ballad and the straight ahead tune and the jazz waltz and that kind of stuff. But then when I started looking at some of the other songs that I was going to put on there that had much more of a little bit of a Brazilian edge or a Latin edge, it immediately made me think of Brian Kazera. Brian and I go way back. We played in a Latin band many, many years ago for a minute. And Brian just has a really good feel and understanding for those grooves. Part of me was like, well, it's a piano trio, so I want to keep it acoustic. But then I started thinking, there's many trios out there that use the electric bass. There's nothing wrong with that. And Brian just had the approach that I wanted for those songs. So I just sort of started divvying up the songs, like which ones would be more suited to Joe and Ed and which ones would be more suited to Jordan and Brian. Because, same thing with Joe and Jordan. They're two completely different approaches. Joe has beautiful facility, a lot of chops, a lot of great ideas, very creative. And Jordan, much more rhythmic, much more in the pocket, much more like a more groove approach, which really fit the songs that I had him on. One of them has a slight Cuban influence, and another one is more Brazilian, and another one is like a mambo feel, like a New Orleans mambo, and just having that player with that more sense of groove rather than constant chops, really fit those songs. Whereas the other songs, Joe played a beautiful intro on the ballad and played, just beautiful solos on the straight ahead stuff and really killed. There's a song on the record that's in 7/4, and Joe just killed it. He just really, really captured the idea of crossing those bar lines and playing very freely over the 7. And so I think I chose the right guys for the right tunes. And so that's how the two trio thing kind of happened.
It's always so interesting to hear musicians talking about their music and where it comes from for them and what turns them on musically. We're going to hear another track from Wayne Maureau's At the Water's Edge, and then we'll be back to talk some more about New Orleans and kind of looking at the difference between the pandemic and Katrina, how it affected the city. But first, here's a piece called Reflections and Wishes. Wayne Maureau from his new record At the Water's Edge. love this music. I hope you're enjoying it. Wayne Maureau, Reflections and Wishes. And now here's the next part of my conversation with Wayne Maureau. You play with so many different people as you said, in so many different styles. I was checking out your website, and there's all these great videos of you with these different bands doing completely different stuff. And I just think it's very cool, and it looks like you're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Like I said earlier, that's what I enjoy, playing a lot of different things all the time, keeps it fresh. So
it's been almost 18 years since Katrina. And, I have my own story of having spent time at a clinic in New Orleans after Katrina for 6 months. I'm a psychotherapist, so I volunteered at Common Ground over in Old Algiers. Just wondering, from your point of view as a New Orleans native, as a musician, part of the culture there, how's it going? I think it's going well. Things have definitely come back as far as the music industry, but it's different as well, I was talking to somebody just recently about this, and it seems like every time we have any kind of massive event, it changes the scene. For example, one of the things that changed after Hurricane Katrina is pre-Katrina, there were a lot of really late night gigs in New Orleans. I mean, I would get calls for gigs all the time that wouldn't start till 11 or 12 o'clock at night and go to 3, 4 in the morning. That was commonplace. But after Katrina, everything seemed to shift earlier. So now, instead of the late gig going till 3 or 4 in the morning, you were done by 1:30 or 2. So it was definitely a shift in that. Also, some of the scene shifted a little bit. One of our major music streets here, Frenchman Street, which back pre-Katrina was more of like an arts district, and it was a lot of more creative music, original music. It was more of a bohemian kind of a vibe. Since Katrina, it's slowly becoming more and more commercial. People are even joking about calling it, a second Bourbon Street. It's not quite that bad, but it is moving in that direction. I mean, you hear more bands playing cover tunes and stuff, and instead of what you used to hear was more original music and creative music. There's still some of that. We still have Snug Harbor as our premier that hosts, good quality, New Orleans artists, whether it be jazz, blues, funk, R&B. But then there's some other clubs where, you might walk down the street and it sounds like you could be on Bourbon Street. So some of that has all changed. Some people would probably say for the better, and some people would say for the worse. Also, I find that the crowds right after Katrina, when things started coming back, crowds were really good. People were way into the music. Same thing after the pandemic. And then it kind of starts tapering off, So definitely some changes in the scene. Same thing with the pandemic. After the pandemic, the gig shifted earlier again. I was playing a regular Wednesday night gig every week at a club called DBA with the late Walter Wolfman Washington. And before the pandemic, we would start at 10 and play till around 1:30 in the morning. After the pandemic, that gig became a 9 to 12. So, again, everything kind of shifted earlier, and people don't stay out as late as they used to. Yeah. Now, Mardi Gras time and Jazz Fest time, all bets are off. Of course. But just during the normal year, I've noticed a definite shift. There's a lot more early gigs, a lot more afternoon gigs, things like that. We'll be back with more discussion about pandemic and Katrina and music after we hear another track from At the Water's Edge, Wayne Maureau's new record. This one's called Skipping Stones. Rolling Stones, Wayne Maureau, At the Water's Edge is the new record. And we talked about how it's two different trios. You can really hear the difference in these songs, the different players. All right, here's the next part of my conversation with Wayne Maureau. This is Paradigms at paradigms.life.
Both of those disastrous situations, Katrina and the pandemic, how did you personally deal with those? What got you through those?
Well, let's talk about the pandemic first, because that was the easier one. What got me through the pandemic is I finally had time to do something I wanted to do for the previous 20 years, which is get my home studio up and running. So that's kind of what I did is I focused on working on my home studio, learning the software, getting the right microphones, doing test recordings, so that's kind of how I spent most of my time is getting my home studio up and running and learning how to deal with that. It's something I'd always wanted to do. And between my teaching schedule at Loyola and my gigging schedule and touring, I just never could get it done. And all of a sudden, bam, I've got nothing to do every day. So in that sense, it was a little bit of a blessing in disguise for me. So I got the studio going. I started doing drum tracking for people who were trying to write songs and stuff during the pandemic. So I was tracking drums for them and sending them files. And actually, that's how this piano trio record kind of came together. Is I did it right here at my home studio. It's interesting because it was also because of a hurricane. So a friend of mine had a tree fall on his studio during Hurricane Ida. And so I called him up to see what I could do for him, and he needed a place to store equipment. So he brought over to my house his Wurlitzer and his clavinet and his guitar amp and a few other miscellaneous things and a piano. So that's how the whole record actually came to be, because all of a sudden I had this really great acoustic piano in the studio, and I love the piano trio. It's been a favorite of mine. It's a wonderful format for jazz. So I took advantage of the opportunity and did the record. So that's kind of how I got through the pandemic thing, and it was admittedly a little bit easier than Hurricane Katrina because you didn't lose your home. We were still home. We were still, my wife was working from home. I was teaching from home over the Zoom thing, so there was still a little bit of normalcy there, even though there were no gigs and you couldn't go out anywhere. And there was still, you were in your own house with your own things. I could keep myself busy doing different projects. And Katrina was quite a different thing than that, because overnight it became, you can't go home. You might not have a home, So that was a lot more difficult to get through, because it wasn't a situation where, okay, I can't do this anymore, so I'll just do something else instead. It was, you can't do anything. You don't have a place to live. So, we spent a while just kind of bopping around, staying with family and friends until I could actually get back into the city. And then we were a little more fortunate than a lot of people. I mean, our house flooded, but it wasn't, 7 or 8 feet of water like some people. So I got back to town, and, we had to live with friends about an hour outside of the city. And I just started coming back and working on the house. So the thing that was difficult about Katrina is that it just really stopped everybody dead in your tracks, and I just became a construction worker for a year trying to get my house back up and running, and then, gigs started slowly coming back a few months into it. But you really couldn't focus on anything else but the fact that you needed new shoes because all your shoes got ruined in the flood. I mean, whenever you have a situation like that where you just take away the basic day-to-day necessities of life that everybody just kind of takes for granted, that changes everything. One of our cars got flooded, so all of a sudden we're trying to figure out how to get through life with one vehicle instead of two. That was a life-stopping event. Stop everything and focus on the necessities of living for the next year.
Do you have a dinghy in your backyard tied to your the roof of your house?
Right. Yeah, I should.
I mean, I actually saw people do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, we live right near the lake. We live right near Lake Pontchartrain, which is some of the highest ground in the city. But even with that, I mean, with Katrina, we still had a foot of water in the house, which you wouldn't think is that bad. But leave that sit for a month. That was the really big problem with Katrina, is nobody could do anything for weeks. So by the time you could get back to your home, everything was destroyed.
We'll be back with the final part of my conversation with Wayne Maureau, talking about his new record, At the Water's Edge, and playing out with 2 different trios after we hear this one, Go With the Flow. Go with the Flow from Wayne Maureau's record At the Water's Edge. Here's the final part of my conversation with Wayne Maureau.
Having survived Katrina, having survived the pandemic, being an artist, being a person of conscience, obviously, I like to always ask something in the vein of, okay, life is for learning. You're learning as you progress. What do you see as being a next step for humanity in the direction of survival and sustainability? Like, what can we do to make things better? What are your, just a little question for you.
That's difficult and complex. I really believe that the main thing we need to do is fix our system of government, because the government drives most of the policies, and unfortunately, in my opinion, our federal government has become, what's the way to word it, so polarized that it's almost impossible to accomplish anything of any substance. We've gotten to the point where, Republicans and Democrats see each other as the enemy, and the radical fringes of both parties are running the show, and the people who are, more moderate in the center, more common sense, kind of get run over. It's really a shame, because I think if we had some, younger people with fresh ideas, in important offices in government, maybe we could move forward with some better policies, in regards to, everything, energy, and, all the stuff that affects people's day-to-day lives. But I just feel that our politicians are so involved with making sure that we're making everyone, how's the word, I'm trying to say, pitting people against each other so they can get votes, rather than trying to solve problems, and they might solve a little problem here or there, or we might, when the Democrats are in office, we'll change this policy a little more left, and then the Republicans get in and we'll change that same policy back a little more right, and all we keep doing is going like this and never really getting anywhere. And the other thing that I always say, that's the main problem with our government, is that the people who have the power to change things are the people who are benefiting from the status quo. And so we're in this catch-22 where, why would you vote to change something that benefits you?
Who wants to give up their privilege?
Exactly. They're not going to give up, all of the perks that they have, in the Congress and the Senate and all that. They're not going to give that up. And the only way to actually change things is to get rid of some of those policies, that these career politicians are getting into these offices and staying there for 30 years. The number of senior citizens we have serving in our federal government, it's staggering.
Yeah, it looks like a memory care facility.
Yeah.
So all that being said, and separate from the government issue, and we're on the same page, What is a core value that you hold that you would like to see humanity adopt more? Like for me, mine is kindness. I really think if people were kinder to each other and themselves, it would change everything.
I would have to say mine is education, because I think we, over the past, I don't know, 40, 50 years, we have let our standards of education lapse in this country. And obviously, the more educated someone is, I think that solves a lot of problems by default. Most of our issues come from ignorance, fear, bigotry, stubbornness, inability to see the big picture, inability to understand someone else's point of view, someone else's opinion. All of those things, I think, stem from ignorance. And I really feel like if we could fix the education problem in this country and stop lowering the standards so that more people could pass and actually educating those people, I think society in general would be much better off. I see evidence of the lack of education in this country all the time. I get emails about different things and just so poorly written that, it's like, really, I know you went to school. You can't write a paragraph better than this. And I'm not, saying, I'm not trying to be some sort of elitist, snobbery thing with the education. I don't expect everyone to be a Rhodes Scholar, but just basic education, basic understanding of art, of history, of mathematics, of science, so that you don't have these people taking these, staunch opinions and digging their heels in on issues that are just factually untrue because they can't see it outside of their own little box. My daughter's in college right now, and that's one of the things I've always kind of tried to encourage her is to be as well-rounded with her education as she can, just so that you can understand issues, you can understand different topics, you can speak intelligently on a variety of topics if necessary, just so that you can understand the world and how things work and not be a person who is, closed-minded and staunch in their beliefs and unwilling to even consider any other opinions or whatever.
Great answer. Wow. Nice talking with you, Wayne, really about all these things. It's fun to go all over the place.
Yeah, that's good. It's great talking with you as well.
Really love the music. So this record, these two trios, are you taking them out at all, or is this a studio project?
Yeah, we're playing a little bit. As a matter of fact, just last week, I played at Snug Harbor Jazz Bistro here in town, and I actually used both trios on that gig. Awesome. So we split up the shows. One trio played half, the other trio played half. We played all the music from the record. I'm also currently booking my quartet, and we're playing some of the music from that trio record, amongst other things that I've written over the years. So we just played a really nice afternoon gig at a brewery last Saturday, and then we're playing in a couple of weeks at the Maple Leaf here in New Orleans. I don't know if you're familiar with the Maple Leaf Bar. You never got there when you were here? Yeah, it's another one of our great music venues. So we'll be playing there on Friday, March the 3rd. And I just, I plan on moving forward and booking gigs, whether it be with the trio or the quartet or even larger groups. So my plan going forward is I just want to share the music that I've written with people, and I want to share, my vision of how I want to express myself musically, not just on my instrument, but just in general. And I want to try to get that out there, so people can hear it.
Wayne, best of luck to you. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
Wayne Maureau, thank you so much for being on Paradigms and talking with me about all this stuff about pandemic and Katrina, but mostly about your music. Really wonderful music. Love the record, the two different trios. I really enjoy how Wayne is really into expression. Music is an expression of something from the inside. If you'd like to learn more about Wayne Maureau, his music, where he's playing next, his website is waynegrooves.com. You can also find him on Bandcamp, waynemaureau.bandcamp.com, and it's WayneMaureau. Check out the new record, At the Water's Edge. Thank you, Wayne. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Paradigms, and that you'll check out our website at paradigms.life. Paradigms also has a Patreon campaign going, patreon.com/paradigms. We just doubled our server costs, so we can really use some more support. I hope you'll check out our Patreon site and become a supporter. The album cover for Wayne Maureau's new record, At the Water's Edge, is a really interesting graphic of water dancing. Our bodies are mostly water, so we are always deeply engaged with water, with fluidity. I guess the point of saying that is we can actually be conscious of that aspect of ourselves as we go through our lives. Feel the water in your body. Be the water in your body. The properties of water. Water seeks balance. Water flows. As we contemplate our lives and the world, we do embody those qualities, and we can do so deliberately. Life offers endless challenges to each of us, and every day we find our way through those the best we can. So just acknowledge the qualities of water and how they can help us. So I guess we're going to have the word for the week be flow. How do we flow? How does water flow when it's not impeded? How do we flow in our lives? Something to notice. And so I'm going to leave you with one more track from Wayne Maureau's album, At the Water's Edge. It's called Island Life. I think you'll like it. Baruch signing off for this episode of Paradigms. We'll be back next time with more inspiring people. We've got some really cool shows coming up in the next couple of months. So until then, flow and be well. been listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life.